Joining us now is political analyst Jim Warren, executive editor of NewsGuard, which rates the credibility of news and information sites. Good morning, Jim. 5 things
Amazing.
to know. Number 1, change wins.
Yeah, Kamala Harris could not overcome the fact that 7 out of 10 American voters yesterday wanted change, particularly on the economy and immigration, and she unavoidably ran as an incumbent. And even though many voters felt, who were polled coming out of the, who were surveyed coming out of the polls, said that Trump lacked her mental acuity and lacked her personal honesty. He was less honest. They nevertheless found him strong and probably a better manager in a crisis, and that led them that way. Despite running a campaign that the Associated Press, very neutrally this morning, calls misogynist and racist. And I think a key divide was between college-educated Americans who tended to go for the Democrats and non-college educated working class, which had been historically, once upon a time, the base of the Democratic Party, no longer.
Let's talk about the youth vote.
Young voters showed a small but perceptible turn toward Donald Trump. And something that will be discussed at the White House today, particularly among the Biden folks, who obviously are probably still chagrined that in their minds he was forced out. Biden did a little bit better with the vaunted youth vote 4 years ago than Harris did yesterday.
And more on the realignment politically, the Latino shift.
Yeah, if you take a look at, for instance, Michigan and Pennsylvania, dramatic shift in Michigan. Biden did very, very well 4 years ago. There was basically a 30-point shift from the Democrats to Donald Trump in Michigan when it came to Latinos. Same thing, to a slightly lesser extent, happened in Pennsylvania, and the Democrats did way more poorly than they had hoped this time.
And let's talk about what women did.
You know, we thought this was going to be an election about women for a bunch of reasons. It was ultimately an election about men. Harris did not do any better with women. She actually did not as well as Joe Biden did 4 years ago. And even though she did win more women than Trump, Trump had a commanding lead among men. And a lot of the punditry and talk from folks like us about what would be the primacy, say, of the Supreme Court abortion ruling, reversing Roe v. Wade, simply did not come to pass. For a lot of those women, the economy and immigration trumped, no pun intended, the issue of abortion.
And the bottom line?
Close to a close Trump victory. We'll see what happens with the House of Representatives. They obviously have the White House. They obviously have the U.S. Senate. And that's going to mean whatever happens in the House of Representatives. You're probably going to have a big deregulatory thrust. You'll probably have a de facto war on federal employees who are unionized. And something that didn't get much attention, you're probably going to have a dramatic change in the American judiciary. Whether it's the district court in Chicago or the appellate court in Chicago or the Supreme Court in Washington, D.C., there are going to be a ton of vacancies, a ton of retirements, ton of resignations over the next 4 years. And in the way that they very stealthily packed the court the last 4 years, quite apart from the Supreme Court, the sexy stuff, but in the lower courts, they will do the same, and it will have a dramatic impact. Elections have consequences, and no place greater than in the courts. A couple of final things. It does look as if Trump benefited politically from the 2 assassination attempts, that there was a mix of sympathy and chagrin that benefited him. He didn't really use it, but maybe it was an absolutely natural instinct. And now you also have simultaneously the apoplexy among liberal Democrats who think the world has now ended and are probably calling, Air Portugal for one-way tickets to.
Is there
Lisbon.
something to be said that maybe some of these exit polls are not quite right. They said this would be a dead heat, and there's a chance that Trump might win all of these swing states. Are there people just not telling people who they're voting for?
Undoubtedly. The guy, we just have to go to Hyde Park and ask the folks at the National Opinion Research Center, which do the best exit polling. They combined with the Associated Press and helped the Associated Press figure that all out. There is such distrust, and we see growing mistrust in the media, that I think anybody even comes up to you to ask, oh, who did you vote for? Chicago Board of Education might find you suspect and not necessarily give you a reason. And I think whereas there may have been some doubts about talking about whether or not you voted for Trump 4 years ago, I think there may have been a tendency this time to say, well, I'm going to vote for the woman, and ultimately not doing so. And what's a surveyor to do except write it down that we think this person is likely to vote for Kamala
All right.
Harris.
Jim,
Thank you,
thanks
Jim.
for
Sure,
joining
guys.
us.